Hello, YouTube. I'm Vince White. I'm an employment attorney. On this channel, we answer publicly posted questions from YouTube users getting folk stance they need from an employment attorney. We have a question here from Hannah-YF3PB, YouTube user Hannah, who asks us, "Hi Vince, love your channel." Hannah, thank you so much. Love your taste in channels. Hannah goes on, "Is there any recourse if the mediator does not provide requested accommodations for disability during mediation?" So, I would need to know what mediator you're referring to. Like if your job has retained a mediator for the reasonable accommodation dialogue and had the mediator mediate the back and forth about what accommodations are viable for you, then that's very interesting. It's somewhat rare, but I have heard of it. That mediator generally would not award you accommodations. That mediator would be mediating, right? Helping to mediate the conversation around what accommodations are reasonable and not reasonable and what you'll ultimately be granted. But the parties are the ones who decide. Mediators do not decide things. Arbitrators decide things. Judges decide things. Juries decide things. They are, as we say, the deciders. None of you are going to get that joke because it's from an obscure speech by George Bush Jr., who I think is a war criminal. And I reference it all the time because it was the funniest thing I've ever seen, where he was like, "What you need to understand is, I'm the decider." It was phenomenal. It was phenomenal watching someone with so much blood in his hands just be like, "Yeah, nobody cares what you think. I'm the one who's going to do the things." You're just like, Jesus. Okay. All right. I guess you know what you want to do. I digress. Mediators don't decide things, Hannah. Mediators facilitate discussions and try to get both parties to agree on something. So if you're going to a mediator in your reasonable accommodation dialogue, that person is not the one who grants you accommodations. Or at least I would never have seen such a thing in my life. Now, if you're going to mediation in the EEOC or mediation in federal court or state court, what have you, that mediator still would not generally be granting you an accommodation. That mediator would be trying to get you to settle your claims, trying to facilitate a settlement discussion about your claims. One of those things, one of the settlement terms that could be in play would be granting you the accommodation if you're still employed there. That could certainly happen. I've seen mediators facilitate that. But again, those mediators are not deciding. Listen, is there forms of mediation where the mediator can decide things? Yes, absolutely. They're incredibly rare. More likely, you just have a transformative mediation, as I think popularized by my professor, Baruch Bush, who was, a good professor, who I think was a big founding father of transformative mediation, which is essentially just getting parties to feel heard and then helping them to have a voice and speak and helping them to agree on things on their own, right? And it can be a very effective approach to mediation, although most practitioners, I would argue, of transformative mediation fall a little shy of the mark, perhaps. Now, listen, is it possible that you're subject to some form of mediation where the mediator is empowered to make a decision? I guess. Certainly, that is possible. Those things do exist, although I've always contended they're not actually mediations anymore. They're some kind of quasi-mediation arbitration mashup. But I suspect none of this matters because you've had a mediation and you didn't get what you wanted. We know that much, right, from your question. Now, generally, if you're asking me what the recourse is, I'm going to say, well, you've got a right to a reasonable accommodation under the Americans with Disabilities Act and the federal law. You're going to have some additional claims on the federal side and potentially some state and local law claims as well. Check with local counsel. And your recourse, if you don't like what your employer is doing or what a mediator is doing to not grant you your accommodations because you think they're reasonable and you think you're due these accommodations, would be to exercise those statutes, those laws, which grant you rights and claims and private rights of action, and you can go forward and you can file a lawsuit or an administrative action with the EEOC or an action with a state agency, something like that, check with local counsel. That would be your recourse. That would be the path forward if an employer is refusing to engage in the reasonable accommodation dialogue or to grant you a reasonable accommodation, right? or even if they're just harming you because you're asking for a reasonable accommodation. Any of these things could trigger claims, where I would recommend you speak with an employment attorney and potentially pursue your claims. The mystifying thing is that you are seeking accommodations during a mediation, which is, listen, again, that can be a settlement term, but that's not generally what happens at mediation. Usually mediation is trying to get to a settlement agreement of a claim, usually in this field, right? But again, I don't fully know what's happening. I don't have the full context for what you're experiencing or where you are, or what your employer's doing internally, or what the local laws are, right? So I can't say for sure. I'm just saying it sounds a little bit out of the norm, but if the employer is falling short, you would still have claims unless you have chosen for some reason to sign your claims away with a release. Anyways, I hope this is helpful. Hannah? Think I'm going to sneeze? Not going to sneeze? Am I going to sneeze? No sneeze. No sneeze. Hannah, I hope this was helpful. It was helpful. Like, subscribe, comment down below. Share the channel so it can grow. I hope you get your accommodations. I hope you're made whole. I hope that you have everything you need to be happy and successful in the workplace. And I wish you all the best. Take care.